This is Innovation and Leadership, where we interview Navy SEALs, venture capitalists, pro athletes, best-selling authors, Hollywood filmmakers, really as many different kinds of high achievers as we can get to come on the show. Today's episode is going to be from our mini-series that we created with Corporate Alliance, asking top CEOs and executives and entrepreneurs who have had very large exits, specifically about their thoughts on leadership and people. Also, I want to talk to you about one of our show's sponsors. I met these guys back on episode 6. CEO Zach Smith was telling me all about starting a skateboard company and how much he hated doing the bookkeeping for a skateboard shop, and how he really got led to start this business, Bookly, that's a hybrid combining bookkeeping software and human services. And I'll tell you why I let him become a sponsor. It's because I use their service now. I don't love paying $50 an hour for bookkeepers to do stuff that I know software could do way, way cheaper. But I don't love bookkeeping at all. So I want a real live human who knows what they're talking about to help me with the stuff I don't understand. Probably the straw that broke the camel's back for me, though, the thing that put me over the top, was that they could do my taxes and payroll also. So totally suggest checking them out. Go to their website, bookly.co, and check out their flat rates. I've been super happy with them. So now on to today's episode. But Brandon, when we were leaving off at the end of part 1, we were talking about this idea of being a trusted advisor and how it's more than just being an expert. Can you talk about a few of the people that kind of inspire you look up to in that way?
You bet. You know, my path in business really started at age 13. I remember my father was given a book by my mom on Father's Day, and the book was called Iacocca. And it was the autobiography of a gentleman named Lee Iacocca, who was really the icon of the American automotive industry in the 70s and 80s. And I pulled that book off the shelf that Father's Day weekend, and I could not put it down. I actually read it cover to cover, and it changed my life. It opened my eyes to the world around me, and the way Lee Iacocca presented kind of his views on business, life, politics, you name it, it really brought a sense of color and dynamism, I think, to really what really propels the world around us. And it opened my eyes to business in a way that really, I think, inspired me moving forward. I've been very, very fortunate in my life and career to have great mentors. One mentor in particular, when I was a young broker trying to forge my way in the business and you know, create a leading position in the market, you know, put his arm around me and took me aside one day. I was 21, and he said, you know, one of the problems you have, Brandon, is you look too young. You know, I had a very kind of youthful, boyish appearance at the time, and he said, you know, it's something that you need to work on compensating for. And it's funny. This is going to sound humorous, but he advised me to get glasses, even though I had perfect vision at the time. He says they don't have to be prescription glasses, of course, but you know, you need the appropriate, you know, eyewear that will help you present yourself more professionally. And he says, and go throw away all of those flashy, trendy suits that you've been wearing. You need to go back to the basics. And you know, and he also advised me against. I was driving a little flashy red Acura sports car at the time, sports sedan, and he advised me to go with something a little bit more conservative. And you know, it was a pivotal time. I could either bristle at that and say, you know, forget you. I mean, who are you to tell me what I should be doing different? I'm doing just fine and succeeding on my own, or really humbling myself and taking that constructive criticism and that advice and then applying it. It was some of the best advice I've ever been given, and it truly changed my life. Within a week, I implemented the changes that he suggested, and it's funny, it's sad but true. Perception is reality, and you know, when you're a service provider, when you're in the professional services business, you know, people are making judgments based on, you know, first impressions and the way they perceive you. And I learned a very valuable lesson virtually overnight as I made some of those adjustments that my early mentor asked me to make in order for us to work together and for me to really take it to the next level. It truly did change the dynamic of how executives and business leaders related to me. And frankly, I think I acted the part a little bit better. I mean, there's something, culturally about the office dynamic that you create as an organization that exudes either a level of professionalism or betrays it. One thing we do differently is, our offices by design look like law firms. We're very private office centric. Our professionals are in private offices. They're not in a sea of cubicles. We don't run a sweatshop. This is not a traditional sales-oriented organization with a big trading floor. I mean, we take our role as trusted advisors and dealing with highly proprietary, sensitive information and leveraging that information in order to help, our clients, outperform the market and to protect their interests. We take that very seriously, and I think you see that reflected in our culture. I learned that from some of the early business leaders and entrepreneurs that I had the privilege of working with and watching them and learning from their example. It takes an element of risk-taking and fearlessness in order to be an entrepreneur. And I have to say, the greatest tribute I can give on a podcast or something like this is really recognizing the risk takers, the people that are willing to push the envelope and really create whole new industries, or really, I think go against conventional wisdom. You look at a lot of the up and coming companies that are truly changing our world, and they're led by visionary leaders that were risk takers that didn't listen to the naysayers. I mean, Lee Iacocca, going back to that book, I mean, he had a lot of critics. I mean, he was fired from the CEO position at Ford Motor Company and ended up having a falling out with the Ford family. I mean, it's an epic story, and he rose from the ashes like a phoenix in order to turn around Chrysler Corporation and really, I think, propel the automotive industry to the next level. And hearing his story and reading that as a young man truly had such a profound impact on me and inspired me. By the time I was 15, 16 years old, I had my own subscriptions to the Wall Street Journal and Business Week, and I loved reading the stories of kind of the who's who, the people that were literally changing our world. And it wasn't enough to know, okay, Steve Jobs is the CEO and founder of Apple, or Ray Norda at the time was the chairman of Novell Corporation, or Lee Iacocca was the head of Chrysler. It was learning what drove those individuals, what was in their DNA that made them special and really distinguished them from everyone else in the crowd.
You think about that kind of pattern recognition, so that we can put in the meaningful repetitions to build our own leadership habits or networking habits or any kind of those kind of things that help people achieve things that are uncommon, right? And it's not just hard work, right? It's hard work on the right things. So going back to this story about this mentor who gave you this advice that was an opportunity for you to bristle, what do you think it is about him, or what patterns about the way he was doing this do you think, helped you not feel blamed and helped you become open to information that maybe wouldn't naturally have been as welcome?
Well, I love people who lead by example, and that's one thing about him. I mean, it was easy to take his guidance and direction because he walked the talk. He wasn't all talk. He actually lived it. I think success in business is 90% about showing up every day. It's persistence. And what separates the business leaders, the entrepreneurs who have really made a difference from those who haven't, who've ended up being mediocre and not having an impact is really just that. It's being persistent and showing up on a day-to-day basis. I mean, what we do, in the commercial real estate realm is not rocket science. I mean, we're selling market intelligence. We're helping to guide and direct people and make good decisions and to help them, navigate their commercial real estate strategy and their facilities planning or investment strategy. And a lot of it really comes down to being persistent and following up and doing what you say you are going to do. It's following up on your commitments and doing it with a level of integrity and professionalism that really distinguishes you from everyone else in the crowd.
That makes me think a ton about my mentor, who eventually became my partner when we started that private equity fund. And he had set such a good example for me. You talk about persistence or going that extra mile, right? He was completely willing to drive 5 hours to a meeting that was a maybe, and back home the same night so he could be back working the next day. And it's just like, it's not really that tough. It's just almost nobody's willing to inconvenience themselves that much. Or like the professional thing, he will show up to meetings 15 minutes early to make sure he doesn't waste somebody else's time because of traffic or something unforeseen. And it's interesting how we live in a society where being busy is a badge of honor, but most of us aren't willing to think about how busy someone else is above ourselves and make a sacrifice like showing up 15 minutes early, right?
Absolutely. I think of two of the greatest examples of my life. Number one is my father. My dad is my greatest example, not only in business but in life. And he was not in the commercial real estate business. In fact, I think my mom and dad thought I was crazy and didn't really consider it a real job going into commission sales from a young age. But my father was in the utility construction business and grew a big super regional construction company that focused on fiber optics and natural gas installation. But my dad, the one thing I loved about my dad is he was always 110% honest, and he was transparent and authentic. That's one thing that I look for in people is authenticity. I try to gravitate toward those people that are genuine, that are straightforward. And the one thing that I love about my father is he's always been the same man, no matter what stage of life he's been in, no matter how poor, how wealthy, he has remained constant. He's been my North Star, and he's always been authentic and treated everyone by really kind of applying the golden rule in his day-to-day life. Another example is a developer client that I was fortunate to come into contact with at age 18. His name was Jim Morse. By the way, my father's name is Dan Fugal, and I owe everything to him as his eldest son and his example. But the other client is Jim Morse. He is a developer here in the Utah area, an entrepreneur. And the one thing about Jim is Jim treated everyone like they were Bill Gates. Literally every meeting that I attended with Jim Morse as a young man, I watched how he treated people with absolute respect and treated them like they were literally the focus of all of his world and attention when he met with them. And it had such an impact on me. I mean, for years I was waiting for that kind of Scooby-Doo villain mask to come off, that I was like, no one can be this nice, this personable, this genuine and warm just every hour of the day, and truly interested in the people that he is meeting with. But to this day, I mean, it's been 26 years later, and he is still that same man. He has been unchanged through cycles, through losses, through success. He continues to treat everyone like they are Bill Gates walking in the door, and I have a lot of respect for that. I've tried to always remember that in my approach to business. I think we often in business, you have to prioritize. It's tough, aside from information, the most powerful commodity out there is time, and I think often times we as executives, as business leaders, sometimes probably don't take the time to focus on the individual as much as we should, and give that importance and benefit of the doubt to people. I mean, thank goodness, and looking back on my life, that I didn't in Corporate Alliance, people, Jeff Rust, who's the CEO of Corporate Alliance, talks about relationship arrogance, and that business leaders are often guilty of relationship arrogance, where they actually try to assign a dollar value or potential financial yield to a potential relationship, instead of looking at every opportunity as being equally important and not being discriminatory. And I look at the incredible companies I have had the privilege of working with and representing, that have come out of the garage, that have started with just one or two or four guys, and treating that assignment or that relationship with the same importance you'd treat a company with thousands of employees with a multi-billion-dollar market cap, I think is important. And I think that is something that is lost in today's business world, that needs to be, I think, championed.
Well, I mean, for me, certainly, I think of some of my mentors, a guy named Terry Warner that's written some incredible books, and different people that have changed my life, who I've had the chance to later meet and see that they actually walk the walk, right? And that kind of self-forgetfulness about, this isn't all about me, this isn't all about what they can do for me, and like just really being present with people. It's you're right, it's not as common, but it's incredibly magnetic. Shifting gears here a little bit, I've been in commission sales earlier in my career, right? And it can be, in my experience on some of the teams that I have, it can kind of be a I got mine type of environment very easily. When you think about the principles that have been the most helpful to you expanding to 30 offices and hundreds of staff of, quite frankly, people who could have temptations for self-focus because it's my commission, what advice would you have for other people that want to go from being a good regional player to being a real national player?
Well, I kind of touched on it earlier. I think being willing to work in partnership with others in order to create more exponentially is going to be key. I think those agents, those professionals that try to hoard everything, whether it be money or fame or clientele, end up really operating from that scarcity point of view that I think undermines one's ability to really create an enduring and powerful impact on the environment. It's and people can sense that. Other executives, other business leaders can sense when someone is again just trying to get in front of a commission or a sale, or just trying to really create a financial event by virtue of the relationship. I think not having that sense of desperation, it really does help the psychodynamic, because you can sense it in the air. My father always used to say, there were two things he used to tell me when we would visit early in my career. One was, he said, always operate like you have a full tank of gas. Even though you may be running on fumes and just barely coasting into that gas station or into that next meeting, always walk in as if you're operating on a full tank of gas, with quiet confidence, not arrogance, not overconfidence, but a quiet confidence that would exude that not only that attitude, but that feeling that people would want to gravitate toward and be part of. And the other thing he always used to say is, don't let anyone see the holes on the bottom of your shoes. Even though your shoes may have holes in the soles, always keep the top polished, and never betray your professionalism, even if you are starving and living from sale to sale at times, which is a key part of growth in business. But I think putting that relationship first and acting the part, and not carrying that sense of desperation or focus on some financial expectation is going to be key to someone's success on every level.
That's solid advice. thinking about, again, this expansion and people who would like to go from however many staff they have to hundreds more, right? And growing the organization. When you think about what that takes, what kind of lessons do you feel like you would have wish you could have learned earlier? I mean, everybody who's grown anything has made all these mistakes, right? And it's like you were talking about, that persistence to like pick ourselves back up instead of curl up in the corner, right? But anything that you can say, like, man, I tell you one thing I wish I would have learned a little earlier.
Well, I'll tell you, I find myself in the fetal position more times than I care to admit. And, oftentimes these days, with added responsibility and added risk that comes with that, I've created a whole file that I could name "Be Careful What You Wish For You May Get It." And, with growth, with success and opportunity, there comes great responsibility and obligation. And I think knowing one's boundaries, knowing the limits, and frankly, I think having a balance in your life is going to be important. I am probably the worst example of work-life balance that you will ever come into contact with. I'm terrible. To this day, I'm struggling. I'm always trying to seek better ways to achieve work-life balance and failing miserably day after day. And I suppose it's the price of market domination on one hand. But I think that's something that I would encourage everyone to look at is taking a personal inventory. Everyone has different priorities, goals, and objectives. What is right for one person isn't necessarily right for another. I've learned over time to really respect that my partners may not want to work 18 to 20-hour days, and it may not be important to them to lead the market or to be producing at a certain level. It may be just to provide a high level of service and integrity and professionalism to really their clients, and they are seeking that quality of life and that work-life balance and able to achieve it. I look at my father. I don't know how he did it. To this day, I marvel at how he was able to be home every night for, or at least most nights, for family dinner, yet still, be a business leader, give service in the community and be involved in a whole series of other, pursuits. And I think that's one thing that we're all challenged with in this day and age is how do we achieve that balance in life? And everyone has a different definition of balance. I would say find out what that is. It reminds me of that old movie Karate Kid. I think it's one of the top 5 movies of all time. Not the remake with Jackie Chan, which kind of sucked. It was okay. It was half-baked. But the original one, with Daniel LaRusso and Mr. Miyagi, I mean, there's so many core principles in that movie. I often look to pop culture references in order to help drive, I think, a lot of my points across. But it's a great example. It's one of those classic movies that focuses on balance. Getting balance in your life and being able to find that elusive, balance between ambition, and achieving your goals, and also, making sure that you don't compromise your integrity, your standards, or your quality of life in the process.
Well, it's so great because, I think, especially for anybody who maybe has a more ambitious personality type, more can be really addictive. For me especially, like when I had some early wins, it was like, man, no family sacrifice was too big for me to make another big check, right? And I think about, probably one of my favorite books on that subject is that Harvard professor Clayton Christensen. He's got that book, How Will You Measure Your Life? And he just talks about, if you don't intentionally define these things that you've just talked about, they're not going to define themselves by accident. What's going already is probably what's going to keep getting more of, right? I don't know, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think your thought about have a look in the mirror is something that I could be doing more of and should have done more of in my career along the way. And when I have done it, it's been one of the most beneficial things to my life and my family, right?
Right. And I'll be the first to admit I am the worst example. I mean, people say, when is it enough? What are your goals? I mean, when is, what is your number? I mean, there's a movie a couple of years ago that came out, Wall Street 2. It was the follow-up from the original iconic classic Wall Street with Michael Douglas and Charlie Sheen, which I know it's rated R, but it's required viewing for anyone who comes to work with me, because there are core principles in that movie as well that really are applicable to this day. But in one pivotal scene in Wall Street 2, the kind of elder statesman, or the Gordon Gekko equivalent of that movie, which was played by, I think, Josh Brolin, great actor, was sitting in his study, his rich study in some Manhattan brownstone, and the young protege, was there, and the young man says, when is it enough? Everyone has their number. What is your number? And the elder looks at him, and kind of with a smirk on his face, he says one word: more. And unfortunately, that has often been kind of my approach. It's more. I haven't been driven by numbers. I've been very fortunate in that I'm well compensated for producing results, and I've been very, very blessed to have a career that I truly love, that is my hobby as well. I mean, it was a happy coincidence that there are financial rewards in the commercial real estate business. I would tell all of those that are listening that success, in my view, has nothing to do with money. It has to do with excellence. Even though money is a very effective scorecard, I have to tell you, I have more respect for a teacher who is the best at what they do, who literally takes it personally, and you can feel, how much they care about what they're doing and how much of an impact they're having, and that translating to really changing people's lives. I look at some of the school teachers I had in high school and junior high. I am indebted to those people. I am so thankful to have good mentors and a diversity of people who I would define as absolute successes in their life. And it isn't always correlated with monetary success or financial success. I think success comes down to excellence and being the best at what you do, and frankly, helping others achieve success in their own lives. I think that's a measure of one's success. How much are you helping other people achieve their goals? And how much are you putting other people's interests ahead of your own?
Well, and it's funny how much longer lasting that one is. I remember being a young punk kid buying my first really expensive car, and like a week later, I'm like, hold on, this is all we get? How come nobody cares that I have this car or whatever, right? But then you think about, some clients or some other individuals we've been able to help make some big moves that they wanted to be able to make in their life, and years later they keep coming back with, the comments about how it affected them. So much more personally gratifying. And I would say even if they never said anything back, it's that it's funny how service is like a success that keeps on giving internally, right? Well, listen, this has been great. We really appreciate all the time you've given us. People who want to reach out, people who might have commercial real estate needs, things like this, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
You can catch me on LinkedIn. Google me, again, Brandon Fugal, Fugal, or go to my website, www.cbcadvisors, that's ors.com. And I always joke, but it's sadly true. If you're in the Intermountain West or in the Utah market, just drive around for a few minutes and you'll inevitably bump into one of my signs, and you can reach me with ease. I'm unfortunate for me, very accessible, but that's a part of really providing, again, that level of service and really hopefully putting a dent in the universe. But please, I encourage anyone, feel free to reach out to me. Any questions at all. I kind of alluded to this earlier. I have very little work-life balance. I'm totally screwed up, but I love what I do. And so, I'm one of those guys who's answering his phone at 2 a.m. and sadly still at the office. So don't hesitate, and I wish you all the best. It is a privilege to be part of this podcast, and really an honor to be part of a vibrant, successful business community. All the best.
Thanks so much. Well, that's it for the episode. One other thing I wanted to tell you about, if you remember the guys from Convoy in episodes back, Ken Free and Trent Mano, I went on one of their CEO trips to New York, and I met a guy named Brent Thompson, very successful entrepreneur. He was former CEO of Jive Communications, big company now, I think $300 or $400 million. Anyways, he started a new company called blipbillboards.com. I'm super stoked they're a sponsor now. But I remember a year and some ago when I met him, I thought it was genius. Instead of having to buy 6 months or a year's worth of billboard for thousands of dollars, you can buy 8 seconds at a time for like 10 or 20 cents. You pick what billboard you want it on, what time of day you want it to run, and it just puts so much power in the hands of marketers and CEOs who want to try something and see if it works. You can buy as many or as few as you want, change it as many times as you want. I think now our podcast is being advertised on billboards in like 18 different states because we have these guys as sponsors. We're pretty excited about it. Hope you check out blipbillboards.com. Thanks.